What's up? It's Paul from Guitar World, and today I welcome Joel Hoekstra, who I consider a first-class monster guitar player, as well as someone, if you can't play anything, they call on you as the stunt guitarist. Now, Joel, of course, has played with top artists like Cher, Night Ranger, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and most notably, Whitesnake, and of course, on Broadway with Rock of Ages, but you've been a Guitar World columnist for us, so.
True story. Yeah. It was an honor to be writing the School of Rock column, I believe, there for a while, and had a really long time relationship with you guys. I think that started back when I was a Night Ranger coming in to teach some of the Night Ranger stuff. And so go way back with you guys, and thank you for the brotherhood and the camaraderie and for having me back.
Take me back. I know you've mentioned before that your parents are musicians, classical musicians. And what were you listening to growing up? Like, what were the records you were spinning? Where did you catch the musical bug, so to speak?
I mean, early on, I was just the little kid. I mean, when I talked cello and piano, that was like ages 3 and 7, respectively. So I just looked at that like it was homework, more or less. And I was really, my initial dream in life when I was a little kid was to be a pitcher in baseball. So, I mean, I was just pitching and that was my thing. But MTV came out the early days when they only had about 7, 8 videos in rotation, and saw AC/DC and Back in Black was out. I saw Angus Young. I just thought that's the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life. I want to be him.
Yeah.
Didn't realize I was going to grow to be a foot taller and not play a whole lot like him. But nonetheless, that was really the music that made me want to play guitar and go to my parents and say, please.
So it was AC/DC, more or less?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the first AC/DC album?
Back in Black.
It was Back in Black.
Which, hey man, not a bad way to go in. I mean, I guess if you have to have your Beatles Ed Sullivan moment for hard rock, that's a decent one. That stood the test of time. I believe still is, if not the greatest hard rock album of all time, it's certainly one of.
So that was kind of sort of the launch pad to kind of, that got you the guitar bug. Were there other albums around that time that kind of like really kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I was very much like just a little metalhead. I mean, I was like AC/DC, Sabbath, Ozzy, Dio, Iron Maiden, Scorpions. Those are always the ones that I think about. And you know, you have to realize the cassette era. I was wearing out those cassettes and learning those riffs.
No record player?
No record player. I mean, I think we had one like before that where my sister was listening to disco, and that was not my cup of tea at the time. I was rejecting that. Although I do remember I Was Made for Loving You and thinking, yeah, that's kind of cool. As the years went by, I think due to my parents having the musical talent that they had, I began to respect bands just like based more on the talent than necessarily the raw energy of it. So I branched out more into melodic rock bands that I enjoyed, like Journey, Foreigner, Boston are always the ones that I cite. And I'd say progressive bands like Rush, and in particular for me, because it was that time period, the Trevor Rabin era, Yes, very into those records. And then, of course, I was growing up in the guitar record era. I mean, Yngwie Malmsteen had just kind of broke. And so you had him and Satriani and Vai and Steve Morse with all that versatility. You know, magnificent player whom I admire greatly. So all that stuff was a big influence on me. It was a fun era to grow up in because, I mean, I was primarily looking, my first band was you know, what you call hair metal, but I was the kid with no image. I was like 5'6", short hair. All the guys in my band had the look. So I was kind of the guy that they hired because they're like, well, this guy doesn't look the part, but he plays well. So let's just go ahead and have him on. And that got me going. You know, all kinds of stuff really played into what my influences are. We had a great classic rock scene in the Chicago area. We had great radio stations, The Loop and WCKG and, you know, WMET. But classic rock was a big part of my thing. I mean, I definitely consider Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Hendrix as things that I cite that were stuff that I was into as a kid as well.
Like, yeah, that's what's so cool is back then, you know, you and I both come from the pre-tab, the you know, YouTube kind of stuff. Learning everything that we learned, we kind of had to use our ears to kind of figure it out, right? And then it was also, as you mentioned, exciting because as we were learning along the way, it's sort of like all these guitars started to jump out at you, and so you kind of latched on to one for a bit, learned as much licks from there. Who were the guys that, I mean, I've obviously mentioned a bunch, but did you go through periods of like, because I know for me, I went through my Rush period, then I went through my AC/DC period and Van Halen period, and so on.
Yeah, Rush lasted the whole time with me. I kind of like always had an active interest in what they were doing, even through the period where it was more synth driven. That's probably, I guess, due to the longevity, you'd have to rank them as probably my favorite band of all time, just because of their total body of work and the way they did it. They were so rebellious with all the, the concept records and. But, massive respect for Rush, Triumph, another Canadian band, as long as we're on the topic. Rick Emmett was always an influence for me because he had that raw Jimmy Page style of soloing, but he was also working in classical guitar, which I was studying. So I always thought, well, this is really cool. And that really, I found a liking to, not just in him, but in Randy Rhoads on the Ozzy records, because this was something that connected my two worlds. I had found this rock world that I was into, and I was rebelling against my parents, but then I started to realize, oh, wait, this stuff that they were showing me kind of fits into this. So all these things were eye-openers for me, and I mean, we're really just scratching the surface. There's always bands that I tend to ignore. The two that I've really trying to pay attention to lately, my first band, we had our own originals, of course, but we covered an awful lot of Dokken. So I always forget to talk about George Lynch. But George Lynch was a big influence on me as a kid. He was not necessarily the guy who was playing the scales 10,000 million miles an hour, but he had it in the hands. He had the attitude, the bending. So that's stuff that really was a big influence on me. And Queensrÿche. Somebody had hit me to the Queensrÿche EP when I was a kid. They handed me the cassette. I think I was in 7th grade. So you got to check this out. And so I really wore out that EP, The Warning, Rage for Order, obviously Operation Mindcrime. So Queensrÿche had a big influence on me. I was more or less an 80s rock kid, but I guess to get back to what I was talking about earlier, there was guitar proficiency. So it was a cool era to grow up in because it was acceptable to admire somebody like George Lynch or Yngwie Malmsteen. But it was also acceptable to admire Al Di Meola, what he was doing, or put on Christopher Parkening and listen to classical guitar, put on Joe Pass. You could literally put on anybody with any type of proficiency, and there was validity in that because these guitarists that we were listening to were virtuosos in their own rights in our particular genre that we enjoyed. But I always just was a pretty open-minded kid musically, I think. The initial passion, certainly the 80s rock. And ultimately, that's what worked out for me. Now, my timeline is such that I went away to GIT, and as soon as I graduated, Smells Like Teen Spirit came out. And so that kind of launched a window of, okay, you're not going to be relying on chops or playing technical if you're going to function as a professional guitarist. So I went through a lot of different things. I played in hip-hop bands. I played in acid jazz bands. I backed up singer-songwriters. Even going further back, I was playing in wedding bands and things like that. I mean, anything that I could do to make a living at with guitar. That said, I did sustain a connection to that through people like Jim Peterick, who I've mentioned quite often as somebody who I really owe a lot to Jim. He put me in that house band when I was just a local Chicago musician, his World Stage Band, and got to back up all these nationally known and internationally known artists, and ultimately led to Night Ranger for me.
Right. So by that time, I mean, obviously there's that span of you just learning guitar, then playing in bands, and then going to GIT. I mean, where was that point where you just started to become that proficient, where you started to build this catalog of knowledge in music, music theory?
Well, my parents being classical musicians, my dad specifically was a music theory instructor. So I've always had an affinity for understanding theory and kind of enjoying the music that you can make from it. Hence some of my fusion stuff early on. I think understanding that you can find chords based upon scales and create more abstract harmony and make music that's a little more out there.
So if you had all sort of that background, what made you go to GIT? Just you wanted to get more?
So I went to a great rock teacher. He taught me a lot of rock songs, but he's primarily a rhythm player. And me and my friend who had showed me the rock riffs, we started to get to the point where we wanted solos transcribed, which back then meant toggling on the cassette and the teacher doing that for you. And I don't know that that was in his wheelhouse. So they hired a teacher named TJ Helmrich at this same little mall store in Orland Park, Illinois, where I grew up specifically, known for its malls. And TJ was at that point in time working on the 8-finger technique, and he had designs on heading out to Hollywood and going to GIT, which he did, and then landed a role teaching at the school, doing open counseling. So that made it a no-brainer. I had a good friend. By that point in time, TJ wasn't just my teacher, but we were friends. We would get together and jam. And so I thought, well, this makes good sense. He had said, this is a great place to be, make connections, etc. So I went out there. Now, that being said, yeah, make connections if you're ready for it. I was not. I mean, I was like this suburban Chicago kid, and at that point in time, there was no YouTube to gauge yourself against the other players in the world. There was only the people in your local neighborhood, and you could go, like, I guess I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I was putting in a lot of hours, and I was practicing a lot of guitar, but it certainly was an eye-opener that opening day at GIT, and we sat in with just, I believe, our 6-month class, day one, and I was sitting there with 500 people with their guitars.
Wow.
Going like, oh my gosh. Now, it turns out I had a really nice class. I went there with Pete Thorne, who obviously has made a great career for himself, guitar playing, great player, great guy. So I did indeed make some connections from that, but I wasn't ready. I mean, I went there at 19 and I hadn't done a whole lot of like, let me gig and let me learn what this is all about, make records, dabbled, did some of that. But I just really wasn't ready for the pro world.
But where were you technique-wise when you got to GIT? Were you decent, or where were you?
In terms of the 8-finger technique and stuff like that, way ahead of where I am right now. I mean, it took a like way back burner thing because, my career became more about like, playing gigs, and obviously that becomes 95% of our rhythm guitar.
It's fitting in, right?
And so the shredding and all that stuff and the fancy leads becomes an afterthought. But technically, now, it's the Dunning-Kruger thing. Like, I remember sitting in open counseling, jamming with the instructors, thinking, boy, I'm just ripping and I'm shredding. I had all the confidence in the world as a 19-year-old kid.
Yep.
And, now looking back on it at my, more advanced age, I look back on that and go, oh my gosh, I was getting my ass kicked. I just didn't know it. Those guys sounded very professional, and I was just playing as fast as I could.
Right. But take me back to, you said you learned that 8-finger, that dual technique from your guitar teacher, not necessarily Jeff Watson, having to learn it for Night Ranger. So how did you approach that? I'm just curious, like, if you can show something like where did you start with that? Was that something that automatically appealed to you, or how did?
Okay, so what I feel like is
there's a lot in there.
TJ was working on it, so I think he was hoping to like spend the lessons showing kids how to play that stuff, which was probably way ahead. The cart was in front of the horse. You know, I mean, I was learning to like shred, but probably needed to work on steady eighth notes in my rhythms, et cetera, at the time.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I remember at the time, because I think I was in high school, but I remembered, it was hard enough just to get the Van Halen part of it. And then along comes this 8-finger technique. I was like, oh my God, come on. It started to get crazy. So that must have been something new for you as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I picked up an awful lot from him. I mean, most of what I've gravitated towards, TJ made that sort of his exclusive soloing style, where I tended to work it into, I enjoyed some of the rawness of the pick attack and pentatonic and whatnot. So it became a piece of what I do, and I ultimately kind of gravitated more as a 2-finger approach with my right hand, and breaking up just a little bit more out of like some of the accent things. Like if I take A minor pentatonic and I break it into 6s, like So I just want to give an example of why those two things are nice, is if you start to play with the accents. you can learn to improvise with different phrases through the scale. And I have a couple others that I kind of teach on a regular basis, the eighths. Which plays great off a six if I'm going like... And then Zigzag Six, as I call it, which is a title that got laughed at on the No Cover Charge podcast. But yeah, it's a... And you heard me instinctually put some fours in there. So what that does, it gives you free rein to the fingerboard then. If you think about fours... So yeah, it gives you a little bit more freedom to think about it as an improv technique, as opposed to most people when you ask of tapping and they go to the 3 frets and they just kind of go as fast as they can. I've always thought about more of a mid-tempo thing if you have different accents. And then the main thing for me with the tapping thing that was cool was just the interval jumps that you could get, as opposed to what you could get with just your left hand.
Right. But primarily, you only use it seems like you mostly use
just a couple fingers off my right hand. Yeah,
which is all you need, right?
There's other little tricks, like I'll arpeggiate power chords. Which occasionally gets used in some rhythmic things on the albums.
So when you do that kind of stuff on the fly, I notice you're anchoring your thumb on the fretboard. But where's your pick normally when you do that kind of stuff? In your mouth?
Yeah.
So when you do a lightning thing, when you do a lightning phrase, you literally yank it out of your mouth and back in?
Yeah, it depends. So if there's something that's going to be like index ring, I'll tuck it away in the middle finger like that. Yeah,
that's cool.
So there are exceptions to it. And there's all kinds of fun little, like if I take a phrase like... obviously having the little kind of chromatic climbing thing.
Yeah, that's cool. I know, and you did, and in another video, of course, that you did for us, you were doing one of your songs, which I love the fact that you were doing a little bit of that, almost like a harmonic minor, like climb on that, using that technique. It was very cool.
So diminished 7 obviously applies itself just like pentatonic. If you have 2 per string, you've got the,
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. That's wild. Now, being able to do that, obviously, let's jump to when you got into Night Ranger. How did that all happen, like when you got there?
That basically was a situation where I was playing in Jim Peterick's World Stage Band, and Kelly Kagi was there every year. And I found out that Jeff Watson was no longer with the band, and Reb Beach was kind of filling in. And I said, well, look, if you ever need anybody, because they said Reb is probably going to be going back to Whitesnake. Shows you what a small scene it all is. Right. And so lo and behold, about a week later, turns out Reb needed to miss a show with Night Ranger to play with Winger. So I had developed a reputation as a guy who does his homework. That's like what I hang my hat on a lot, just coming in prepared. And I was out here doing Love Janice, 8 shows a week and I was still getting flown back to Chicago to play these world stage events, which were huge. They were like 36 songs. So I'd get 36 songs together and get off the plane on no rehearsal and play the gig down.
Right, right.
And so Kelly talked them into it and said, no, we don't need to cancel the gig. I know this guy with Jim Peterick, man. This guy gets off the plane. He knows 36 songs. He'll play the gig down. So my audition with Night Ranger was more or less a gig. I mean, it was like me meeting them at baggage claim pretty much and saying, let's go do this.
Right into the fire.
Yeah,
wow,
right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I always notice, that even coming in today, it's like you are so prepared as a musician and as a guitar player. Because, when you consider that there are so many guitarists out there who are, devastatingly good technique-wise, it's just not enough. They don't make the gig. What is it about you that allows you to land the gig? I mean, it's definitely more than just having monstrous technique, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like the chops are something I rarely have time to spend time on these days because I'm always working as a pro. Right. Whether that be cutting records, which is primarily like, doubling rhythm guitars very accurately or finding the right part to make the song happen. Yeah. I enjoy a pretty active session schedule and record schedule with the projects I do for Frontiers and my own records. So that stuff becomes really what you're spending the time on and very little, like I'm going to spend 6 hours today working on my tapping technique. So honestly, it gets rusty and then you go back and you hope for the best in brushing it off. Yeah. I'd like to think, that there was a period in time of catching too much flack of being too much of that type of player. And so nowadays, I would almost consider my forte being the guy who can come up with the right part for the right song. Right. Like I just finished up doing a couple guest solos for a Swedish star, singer, last 2 nights before I came in here. And that was really just about writing like hooky solos and finding things that were really, really right for the song. And that's kind of become more my forte, I feel like, as time has gone by. Along with writing and just professionalism and prep. Homework has always been a big thing for me, like being the guy that prepares really hard coming in. Yeah. But again, it's a different world these days. Content creation has become, so much in the forefront. Sure. And that's awesome. I tip my cap to everybody out there. I scroll Instagram and YouTube just like everybody else and see all the amazing clips of everybody doing all the amazing licks. And this is just something from my generation where I grew up more like, the guy who was in a band going to play a gig. And I suppose a lot of that comes from stage experience too, not just understanding how to play to your fingerboard sitting down, but to look outward in an audience and communicate with them, singing backing vocals, just playing good rhythm guitar. Yeah. Those are all the things that have benefited me. But the homework thing was huge. That opened a lot of doors for me.
That's cool because I know that's the funny thing is because your musical resume is so diverse, which diversifies you as a player. The fact that you can sit in with Cher and Foreigner and then yet come in really blazing with all these other, with like Night Ranger and Whitesnake and all the other, and even Accept, as you mentioned before. It's just like it really allows you to become this really well-rounded player.
Well, I think the thing that really got me in the door with the Cher thing, Justin Derrico, my friend from Pink and The Voice, had recommended me to his co-guitarist on The Voice, Dave Barry, Cher's longtime guitarist, as a sub. And I think the reassurance that I could give Dave that I had done pit work here on Broadway, like played in the pits, and that I really understand the nuance of like reading down a score and being on the right pickup setting at the right time and playing a gig exactly like somebody else, playing it down. You have to understand when you go into something big like that, where there's dancers and there's a giant production, that the last thing you want to go in is like try and reinvent it. Yeah. So you go in and you try and make everybody else comfortable. And then as time passes, you can find your moments to try to like make the gig your own a bit. But my MO has always been to get a board tape, like what's happening most recently, because you'd be surprised how many bands that have been around a long time that have kind of reinvented their own live material or even altered the riffs a bit. Like you'll go, well, that's not actually the riff off the record anymore, but like, okay, that's how they're doing it now.
I think that's an important point, because sometimes your natural default is to go to the original song,
right?
And then you'll find that they've absolutely changed it or modified it,
and they're not going to like it because they changed it for a reason. They go, oh no, we changed that to this. So yeah, you always go with like what's happening most currently, and that's gone with all the gigs that I've gotten. Like when I landed Whitesnake, I mean, I didn't really work. Obviously, I listened to all the psych stuff or the Vise stuff or you know, whatever guitar era of Whitesnake. There's a lot of them. But I mainly just studied the board tapes that are happening with Doug Aldrich, because that was preceding my tenure in the band, and just tried to like go after that as faithfully as possible.
Yeah, and speaking of Doug Aldrich, both of you guys both play Les Paul Gold Tops. How did you land on the Gold Top as your primary instrument? Yeah,
it took me forever, man. I mean, I started out kind of a Floyd Rose kid. I mean, I was working on a Kramer and I ended up getting a Jackson from my friend Brett Garsett. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he plays for John Farnham, and he had come over to the States in '90 or something like that to play with Nelson. And so when I went to GIT, TJ Helmrich had landed the job teaching at GIT and befriended Brett Garsett through Cherokee Studios, which is a studio I ended up spending a year working at as well. But it turned into this friendship where we were just kind of getting together. And this is, you know, we were all pretty young, but we just hang out and like drink beers and party and jam till all hours of the night. But here I was, just this 19-year-old kid who hadn't really done anything. And I was sitting with a guy with like a #1 hit on the charts. And so Brett was always really good to me. And while I've never directly copped any of his hybrid picking or legato things, that's where a lot of that influence came from for me. Certainly the tapping from TJ Helmrich. So I was very much like in that world, but also in the world of trying to do gigs and fit the bill and play good rhythm guitar. And then also, as it turns out later, more into like the raw rock thing. So I was trying to take the combination of those things, the fusion thing, and mesh them with a little bit more of like an aggressive rock style of tapping.
Wow. Was that before you started using a Les Paul, or you thought you were still using?
So, I'm so sorry, I deviated from the question. Okay. But yeah, so Floyd Rose, and then for a while, Telly became my main thing, and then Strat. I was playing with Kathy Richardson, singer from Jefferson Starship, and her local band. And that was a little bit more Americana, I would say, if I had to compare it to something. Sorry, Kathy, I hate to do it, but it's kind of Melissa Etheridge-inspired music. So that was more single coil and playing like parts that would complement her acoustic playing. And yeah, I went through a lot. And when I came out here to New York City to do Love Janis, which was a show about Janis Joplin, and the music was primarily Big Brother and the Holding Company, I was like, all right, I'm going to get an SG, because that's what those guys played. And so I went to 30th Street here in New York City. I'm sure you guys know it well. Right across from Ultrasound.
Good
and
old
got my good old Matt. Just did the fret job on this for me, actually, because these were beat to death. And anyway, ended up on the SG for a bit, and then I thought, okay, maybe it's time to go ahead and take the plunge on the first Les Paul I got, which turned out to be this, which is nowadays got so much wear and tear on it. It actually looks like a vintage instrument, but it's not. It's just an R7 that's just gotten like taken around the world with me and beat to hell, basically.
And it's pretty stock as is? Or?
Yeah, man. I'm not a big like experimenter as far as swapping out pickups and things like that. My opinion has always been, if a guitar doesn't sound good and play good, just move on, get something else. So
being a Floyd, it's coming from that Floyd Rose playing and then going to a Les Paul, it's a whole different world. Did you figure out ways to kind of like recreate, say, Floyd Rose-esque, you know, like more of like vibrato or dive bomb type of stuff using a Les Paul?
You know, as soon as I got the Les Paul, things took off. And I mean, I feel like there was maybe only a year or two before I was in Night Ranger. And for that particular situation, when you're in a guitar team with Brad Gillis, he's obviously known for Floyd Rose use. So like, and Jeff Watson was a Les Paul player. So I just thought, well, this is like the best thing team-wise, and obviously to have identifiable styles, which is always something I admired about that guitar team, was that you could tell the difference between them so much. And Brad is so identifiable in that department that it was like, just steer clear of that. And really the same upon joining Whitesnake, because I was playing with Reb Beach, and Reb Beach does a lot of Floyd Rose work. So for me, it was a real just natural professional thing to go to that. And I find I do enjoy the shorter scale, the bending, the vibrato, just the general sound of a Les Paul. All of a sudden I went, oh man, like what was I doing with everything else? And so I've basically fallen into a Les Paul addiction as the years have gone by, and that is definitely my primary choice. Like I default to Les Paul on almost everything.
That's wild.
I have a Jackson PC1 that I'll pull out with a sustainer if I need to on a record, punch in a sustained note that holds for a while.
But you don't do much of the dive bombing type of stuff now, right?
No, I'm not really that guy. Occasionally I'll do like some recordings for people, guest solos and whatnot, where that feels like that might be fun, where I'll default to it and go back to it. And occasionally I'll pull out the Tele or a Strat and do a session with it. I just did like a Rainbow tribute record that was Street of Dreams, and that's obviously all Strat. And so I pulled out the Strat and went back to that. But I'm just like more in my comfort zone with a Les Paul. Yeah.
But say if you're playing in Night Ranger and Brad breaks a string right before the solo to Sister Christian, and suddenly you have to recover, what would you do?
Oh, I mean, I have little... And I would... So, you know, I have my little ways around. Obviously, it's not exactly what he's playing, but
that's pretty cool.
It's enough to cover the solo if need be, right? And
that's
get
awesome.
through. But yeah, I mean, I don't do the correct way of Brad pulling that up a whole step and then bringing it back down the whole step, but it gets me through.
But that's good. I mean, that's thinking on your feet, right? I think that's very important to do that. Speaking of, like, you know, you said you're not much of a gear guy, but like, when you got into all these gigs, how together were you with your, like, say, your guitar sound? I mean, are you particular, or are you really a simple player in the sense that I just need a certain couple things that allow me to get through the gig?
I mean, I went through phases. I had the giant pedal board for a while, where like you'd step on the Zvex pedal for 2 bars to have the specific noise. And when I joined Night Ranger, I mean, we were essentially a fly date band. And I remember that first gig, that was more or less my audition. There was some stuff where Jeff Watson had phaser on his parts and whatnot. So I showed up with a little pedal board with some of that stuff. And Brad came over at soundcheck and looked down and he goes, well, somebody stopped at Guitar Center and bought some pedals. And then he explained to me, listen, man, we're on a situation here with fly dates where we have to go plug and play a lot of times. No soundcheck. Get right out there. So what you're going to find is the more stuff you have up there, the more that can actually go wrong.
Right.
So it was really at that point in time that things kind of transitioned into just keeping it simple. And that really, for Whitesnake, you didn't need a whole lot else. I mean, that's essentially like a delay and reverb, but just a distorted tone and clean tone.
I think again, the Whitesnake part, the Whitesnake for you, I mean, that's very, what I think, close to pretty much your basic sound, right? Your signature sound, I think, is a lot, gain a little bit of delay and,
Yeah, keeping it simple. I mean, if I go out and I do a fly date, I'll get pretty much this exact amp that's right here and throw a couple pedals in the front end.
Interesting.
And, that being said, if there's a gig that calls for that type of stuff, a lot of different sounds. Cher was that way. And we went fractal, and I programmed a lot of different sounds into that. And I
was going to ask you, so do you use modelers as well? I mean, so you're
well-versed? Every gig is different, man. You'll find that, like, Whitesnake, there's nothing like the energy of having, the Friedmans I was using with that on stage and still being able to get feedback and have it be loud and raw, old school rock and roll. versus something like Rock of Ages, where there's no guitar tech and it's 8 shows a week and there's dialogue happening around what's happening. So let's say there's like 2 problems and you start getting, the noise. There's nothing to do, man. I mean, you're just like screwed.
Right.
So, and you're in the middle of this show that's about so much more than your guitar playing, if that makes sense. Dialogue and whatnot. So that made great sense to use Fractal on that. And with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, you're talking about something where the amps can't really be on the stage. You've got to stage the width of the arena. You're not going to be in a station in front of your amp singing backing vocals at a mic stand like a standard band gig. So when you're spread out like that, it made sense for me to go Fractal with that as well. Obviously, we're all in-ears. But, I mean, you can be 50 yards away from your station at any given point in time. Trans-Siberian Orchestra is definitely, about the playing, but it is highly a performance gig as well. I think a lot of that is about entertaining that particular area that you're stationed in when you're in an arena to keep those people visually occupied and play the music and entertained. And, nothing I find works better than throwing out picks. It's amazing. You can have the laser light show, the pyro 10 feet in the air, you're on moving hydraulic lifts, but when you hold up the 10-cent piece of plastic, that's when everybody's like, me. They want something to take home with them.
And you've gotten proficient at getting you hitting your target.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's great. But if you had a preference, do you generally like using real amps and pedals, or do you like using, say, the modelers? Or it doesn't matter to you? You're just more concerned about just executing what you do?
I still like the real amps. I mean, so that's one reason that I still go out. Rock of Ages as a show has been closed since 2014, but somebody licensed the logo and the name, and we go out and play the full-length versions of those songs. And I worked with those guys for 6 years on Broadway, those musicians. So we have a great time. We just get together and we essentially play a cover gig. And look, I'm introduced with my credits, saying what bands I'm from. I play all the solos, have a solo in the show. But I have to admit, no in-ears, wedges, amp behind me. It's really nice to be able to turn around and work feedback. And that's something I miss immensely. Like on TSO, when there's the need for that, I guess I create what you would call fake tone. Because I'll click on a Fernandez sustainer to hold the power chord that's dying out on me too soon. As you know, one of the drawbacks with modeling is that to get high gain, you get a lot of noise, then you're gating, and then you have a problem with the chords or the notes dying too early. And there are times where you want individual lead notes to ring out. So I have quite a handful of guitars with sustainers in them, and definitely enjoy using them. I think it's a musical tool in that particular situation where you need it. And even when I'm recording at home, I reference that I'll use it because I'm in a New York City apartment. I'm generally not tracking with a real amp. I'm generally tracking with modeling.
That's interesting. So just in all the bands and all the artists that you've performed, has there been anything that's been incredibly technical that playing wise that you can show? Like, is there something that stands out to you? Like, Jesus, I got to do that.
I mean, a lot of it, dude. I mean, like all the way across the board. I mean, having to learn all of Jeff Watson's stuff and try and play his really difficult technical solos.
Well, can you show us like something that you would consider like that?
Oh my God! Don't embarrass me on the fly here, man. But I mean, especially I've been playing with Night Ranger since 2014.
It doesn't have to be Night Ranger, but something you would say that would be considered like, Jesus, I got to be an acrobat today.
Oh man, I mean, all the Sykes stuff, because Sykes has so much more of a right hand than I do. So a lot of like what John would do, where he's picking all the notes, I'll kind of just legato to get through it. And yeah, I mean, that's like that particular situation where you go, gosh, I'm not really doing it the way he did it. But then you see videos of like past versions of the band and you realize, well, some of these guys were completely disregarding the solos entirely, so you don't feel so bad. I mean, my thing is to like try and make it as close as possible in those situations for the fans to quote the classic solos. But I don't want to embarrass myself by playing something right now that I'm going to suck at.
I'll tell you one thing I saw you do before, which I thought was really cool, was the way you embellished "Don't Stop Believing." You did a little bit of a little you embellished a little the tail end of it.
Yeah, that was
which is not in the song, but I thought that's something cool. How did you come up with something like that? Can you show that really quick?
That was something where we had the bows to Rock of Ages, and so we would end the song, the show with "Don't Stop Believin'," and then we'd kick in, and the band would play the changes while I would just play the vocal melody. Obviously, this kind of whatever it was, I basically would outline the changes with arpeggios at the end, and then do a whole showmanship thing. I think I would take my guitar and slide it on the stripper poles and jump up on the bar, and the show would end with me jumping off, and I would spin on the floor like Angus.
Yeah.
Or I guess I'd spin on the floor like Angus, then jump up on the bar and end the show that way.
But that's cool.
Just basic stuff. There's nothing really that technical there, but they wanted another time or two around on it.
Yeah, but that's what makes it so cool, is just sort of like it's taking a classic song and hearing something that, wow, that could easily fit in with the original. Considering there's a lot of great licks in that particular song from Neil, but that to me could easily slide in there as well, because it's such a cool little part that you came up with.
Oh, thanks. I mean, that stuff kind of happens on the fly, and that there was a similar situation with the song used to begin with Just Like Living in Paradise, which I'm not even sure I'm going to remember that actual opening. To that effect. But I remember on the spot when they were writing it, it initially was just that opening phrase that Vi plays, and then they were like, "Can you give us one more time around?" And I was just like, "Oh, let me come up with something cool on the spot." And
do you get a lot of latitude to kind of improvise in some of the projects or artists that you're in? Do they allow you to stretch like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that most of the situations I've been in, like I say, I usually start pretty close to what's there, not to freak anybody out. And then as you go, you start doing your own thing. I mean, one of the things right out of the gate with Cher, there was a play-out solo on Turn Back Time, and there was a moment where you had to hold the audience, segment of Bang Bang, where she was in a wardrobe change. And I kind of just did my own thing, and it was a lot of stage antics and stuff like that too.
So rock posturing, more or less?
Yeah, rock posturing, but change up maybe what the other guitarist was doing, because you realize, well, this is your moment, so you might as well just go ahead and change that a little bit right out of the gate.
But how do you go and prepare? What's the mindset? What are you thinking? When you're trying to create this arena rock solo that's supposed to kind of captivate the audience, what's in the bag of playing?
Well, for something like that, Rock of Ages, you have to place yourself in the situation of knowing your audience, and that was a tourist audience, and it's also a campy generalization of the '80s thing. So I thought the tapping thing fit the bill, obviously, to do something that was very '80s. And but there's still things like with TSO where certain solos, I'll just go ahead and wing it on the fly, which is more difficult to do for an arena.
Right.
When you're winging it off the cuff for 10,000 people is winging it off the cuff for 50 people in a club or whatever.
Yeah. But to me, I find the Siberian Orchestra is a little more structured, right?
Yeah, it's structured, but when it comes to solos, there are certain ones that you can just start to toy with and see if anybody says anything. where you're like,
Is that
all
where
right,
the Randy influence kind of comes in?
I'm just going to make this like an improv segment.
Mm-hmm.
No, because I think it's good for my growth as a player
That's
to like
awesome.
learn to improvise in front of an arena as opposed to just playing it safe and playing it note for note every time.
Interesting. And how do you shift your playing for something like that? Is there any particular? Do you start thinking tech like theoretically, or you're just going for it?
No, quite the opposite. I mean, a lot of times I'll start just kind of like dumbed down and go for a feel thing with pentatonic. Just something that's like tasteful.
Sure.
And not necessarily chops oriented. I mean, that's really about the songs and the story and the production with TSO. And then maybe you find like a spot or two to like,
Kind of burn.
some technical stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's moments in every gig I feel like where I find myself doing my own thing with it. And obviously with all the recording I've been doing, that primarily lately I've found I've been able to exist more on my own, playing like me, with what's more in my wheelhouse, more than ever. So it's becoming more and more appealing, and less appealing to cover other people's solos. For me, just to kind of play like what I feel like I would do. I get a lot of call for guest solos and to do records, and those obviously give you all the opportunity to just play like yourself.
That's awesome. I know you have a lot of great friends and musical peers in the industry, like a lot of the famous guitarists that we all love, like say Nuno and a few others you've all interacted with. Do you find that you have to keep up with these guys? Like when they come out with something new, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I need to like Nuno's a good example. Like, here is Nuno when he came out with that song where everyone's just kind of freaked out over the solo like last year. Do you find you're like, oh man, I got to start learning more things like that? Or is it just like, it's more of an appreciative thing? And
maybe like super, super temporarily, but it never holds. I mean, the way I operate, being in New York City and having kids here and going to private schools and the cost of living is, I just stay busy with the guitar every day. So whether that be the recording we've been talking about, or writing, or teaching virtual lessons, or touring, or doing promotional work for such things, I just find myself trying to move forward on a daily basis. That's all I can really do, is kind of be the best version of me. So I try not to worry too much about other players. And I feel like I'm at that age too, where the acceptance is there and the appreciation of others and what they're doing. So more or less interested in just like in a situation like that, like paying Nuno a compliment, more than like worried about like, oh, how come I didn't do that?
Right.
If that makes sense. I know why I didn't do it, because I'm me and I'm just doing my own thing. So I don't compete as much. I compete with myself, and I have standards that I would like to hold to, most of which have not been met today in this interview. But
I wouldn't say that.
But I mean, I feel like that's more important to me ultimately than competing with others. I think the smart thing, it's a good lesson for younger people to learn. I remember going to GIT when I was 19, and you're surrounded by all those other guitar players. And when I was met with somebody that was a great player, the thing was to always kind of move inward from them and want to compete with them. The older you get, the more you realize like, no, the thing is to embrace that they're like that, because not only are these the people that can inspire you or push you, but you develop friendships and you never know where there's some opportunity. They're not going to have to do something that they might throw your way. If you're just a decent human being. If you just learn to like be open with them and talk about, be yourself. Get a little more comfortable in your own skin as far as like what you're capable of and what you're not. I mean, I've had a really good run. I mean, I look at this, I've been at this since I was 11 years old, basically. And that was the last career decision I ever had to make, was kind of like really from the start of that, learning that Paranoid riff we talked about and the riffs that changed my life. That was, I never said I'm going to be a professional guitar player. I just did it. I just played guitar all the time. And if you find a way to stay busy with that, everybody's got their own path, you know, and that's the beauty of the instrument, is that there's so many different ways to be good. There's no one way. So if you go chasing somebody else's way, you're just going to be a bad version of them.
No,
so you try to stay true to who you are and what you're working on and what your strengths are. And that doesn't mean I don't grow frustrated with my own limitations. I do 100%. You know, I mean, I wish I was a million times better player than I am. And I wish I was better at a lot of different things. I do, however, find myself very, very busy with music like every single day of my life. So it's very difficult to set aside time to do such things. Like, especially because, as you know, like if you're going to take on like, well, I'm going to get my bebop chops together. That's not a 1 week thing. That's a can of worms. And you've got to designate a lot of time to that. So I do know how to fake my way through straight ahead jazz a bit and like play the changes and know the arpeggios. And, you know, I did enough work in wedding bands and doing jazz duo gigs with a friend of mine where we'd set up and play background music for people, more or less got paid to practice. I guess what my point is, I've dabbled in a lot of styles. I did the classical guitar study, the jazz. I obviously can kind of fake my way through a little bit of country stuff. Primarily a rock player, but for me, music is infinite. I feel like there was a point when I was younger where I was like, well, I don't even know what to practice, man. I feel like I've got together what I want to get together. And nowadays, it's like, dude, I have no shortage of things that I would like to get better at. I mean, it's just finding the time to do it. And oddly, you know, I mean, I've got 4 sessions waiting for me right now. I'm going to leave here right now, and I'm going to teach 5 lessons in a row. I just did 2 sessions the last night or 2. So leading into this, it's not like, I mean, I prep, I try to get myself ready for you guys, but it's also like a game of like, oh my gosh, I've got other stuff happening too, and let me just hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what's interesting about you. You're like the true definition of a working musician. Like, I mean, I was going to say, you like, there's a lot of guys I ask about, you know, what's your, you know, routine to keep you, you know, fit as a musician, but it seems you've got that covered because of all the, you know, the amount of sessions, the lessons, and all, and working on your own music and just playing that kind of keeps you musically fit and, you know, focused.
Yeah, I think it's a product of living in New York City too. It's just expensive here. So, you know, you're kind of like, okay, well, what's the next gig?
Right.
Like,
you hustle.
Not the next, like, let me take like 6 months off and find myself. It's like, oh, you know, I would love to do that. And I mean, I feel like I do get into that with writing and experimenting from time to time, where it's just like finding new things and the experimentation is still there. But in general, like it kind of comes down to, the working musician thing. And then I would like to think like that also falls under the umbrella of like the working artist, because for me, I've had a lot of great gigs, but you know, it's really important to me from a standpoint of legacy. It sounds so self-important, but like at the end of my career, to be about more than just a guy with some cool gigs, but also released his own music. So the 3 instrumental albums that I've released, and now this is the 4th, Joel Hoekstra's 13 album, to be able to release 7 albums of my own while I've been like constantly juggling multiple gigs. I mean, there's times where I was juggling, like 2019 really stands out, where I was juggling Whitesnake, Cher, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And I was on the road 285 days out of that year.
Wow.
So that obviously is an amazing opportunity to be able to have all those gigs. But in the meantime, you're trying to like create your own music back in the hotel room too, and keep working a bit on that, because that's important to me. I think we all kind of set out to do that. I mean, if it boils down to when you first pick up a guitar, your vision is like, hey, I want to start my own thing and have it be big. And maybe like you could make the argument that I haven't been successful as an artist, but I feel like in my own way I have been, because I've been able to make my own music throughout this. The gigs have supported that. But it's very important to me that I have my musical outlet. And I think if people go back and listen to anywhere from the instrumental albums, Undefined, The Moon is Falling, 13 acoustic songs, and then the Joel Hoekstra's 13 CDs, they'll see that I was being creative throughout the process too.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's a great thing. I mean, there's so many players who would love to be in your position, because, but I think what you've done is you actually really created an identity. I think that's really what we all strive for, is to be someone that is recognized and someone who has their stuff together and known. I think that's a cool thing that you've done. Is the road still appealing to you at this point now, if you get called up for that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love going on the road. Yeah. I love all of it. I mean, the recording thing versus being like out touring is even for me.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really enjoy both of them. And the same goes for whether or not it's a project like Joel Hoekstra's 13, where I'm not only writing the riffs, but the vocal melodies and the lyrics and everything. And it's really my thing. I oversee the artwork, oversee the mix, the whole thing, all the way down to the more democratic situations where you're a part of the puzzle. Like, hey, man, why don't you give us the guitar riffs and then we'll write from there. You get different music from different results, or you get different results from different styles of making music. I said, like, I guess approaches to making music would be the best wording. And I think that's very interesting. And I also think you don't grow if you're not open to other people's ideas. So if it's only your own, you don't really ever learn. And one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from that is you'll have some idea in your head of that you're dead sure it's got to be that. And you'll dig in your heels with somebody and like say, man, no, this is cooler, this is cooler. And you'll end up going with their way. And then like a year later, you couldn't even remember what your idea was. So sometimes, it comes down to more of like, I think you get ratcheted up in the moment of like the discussion with others of wanting it your way versus their way. And then you realize, like, down the road, it's like, what does it matter, man? That's the collaborative process. So, collaborating with other people in music, I think, is very important.
Speaking of collaboration, is there any artist or, that down the road who would be a dream collaboration for you at this point?
A lot of that, during COVID, when that hit, there were some people definitely and said about making some of those collab videos that all did quite well.
Mm-hmm.
My friend Dino Jalusic, who is, if not, the greatest hard rock singer in the world right now, but, certainly one of, and plays great keyboards, plays great bass, plays guitar. We made a couple videos together, I guess 3, if I think about it. Jane with Mike Portnoy on drums, and Mike was a guy, because Mike and I have known each other for years, and Mike's played with 10 million bands, and I've played with 10 million bands, and I thought, well, why haven't we ever worked on anything together? So that was like, crossing some people off the list. I took Bumblefoot's challenge of playing on the promo for his album. I forget the name of the track now, but Ron's always been a friend of mine, and taking a solo on his thing. And I did a version of Abracadabra, of all things, with Arnel Pineda from Journey. And Arnel and I had been tight since 2008 when Night Ranger first went on the road with them. And we said, man, we should do something together sometime. And turns out 12 years later, I thought, let's do something right now. We won't release it, so neither of our bands can really say anything about it. Let's just put it up online. And on his channel, I think it's got 2.5 million, and on mine 1 million, so 3.5 million views. It's funny how a lot of these cover songs get more traction than when you put up your original music.
I think it's what people are searching for at this point.
But that collab stuff, man, anybody that's talented and positive-minded, stylistically, I'm really open for anything. I really just enjoy playing guitar. I played a lot of different styles, and I like getting out there and just making music.
That's awesome. So from what you've learned throughout all this time, what you know now, what would you tell your younger self? Like normally I would ask someone like, what advice would you give to aspiring guitarists? But this is just the same way. It's sort of like, from what you know, what would you say to your younger self? Like advice.
That is possible. I mean, we were poor, quite frankly. I mean, we had no money. I mean, we grew up in a blue-collar area, the suburbs of Chicago, where none of this was supposed to happen for me. Like literally none.
Wow.
So for me to get to the point where through hard work and I guess a bit of luck, you find yourself able to do some great things. And then in a way I'm playing with house money, but in a way I want to see how far it can all go. So I just keep pushing and hope for the best. But that being said, like I know my limitations as a guitar player, and I know my fortes, I suppose, and I just try to work at music every day and see where it all takes me. I've never really had any grand plan beyond being a professional guitar player. As funny as that sounds, for the guy that ended up on stage with Whitesnake throwing shapes with the long hair and everything like that. the most important thing for me was to make a living with my guitar. That's what I set out to do as a kid. And I committed to poverty for that. I went like, okay, I'm probably gonna be poor the rest of my life, but like, you have to have that ability, I think, to get into music. If you're getting into music to make money, man, you have a hole in your head, man. Because I mean, you could like get any other job and work like much, much easier hours and have a nice clear path to do so, where music is like the Wild West, I think. You know, it's like anything can happen at any point in time. So just that it's possible through hard work. And I think that should definitely ring true for any younger players out there now, especially with the internet. The world has shrunk.
Yeah.
You know, you can get your music out to anybody, and a home recording has gotten to the point where you can make a professional record right there where you are. So I don't care where you are. If you're located in a more rural area, if you still have the ambition to reach out to name players and try to expand your name, and obviously things being in the digital domain like they are, you never know where that can take you.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, sage words of advice from a professional guitarist. Joel, I'm going to do a rapid fire question with you real quick. So are you ready for this?
Yeah.
All right. First amp and first guitar.
First guitar was an Electro Westone from the mall, and I had to prove that I was going to stick with it to get the amp. So initially that cool guitar teacher I had told me about the auxiliary input of my home stereo. So the home stereo kind of counts, but then I got the crate practice amp.
Nice.
Yeah.
First song you played in your first band?
I believe we used to open with One Way to Rock.
Yeah. All right. One Way to Rock. All right. Little Hagar. Tone in your fingers or from the gear?
I think a combination of ears, fingers, and gear. I think your ear kind of tells you first and foremost like what you want it to sound like, and figuring out different ways to make that happen.
I like that. Oh, very cool. Best gear find?
Oh, probably this. I mean, you know, just eventually stumbling upon being a Les Paul player. It took me forever to commit to that in life. And then once I got there, I went, I'm an idiot. I should have been doing this for a very long time.
And how old is that guitar, by the way?
So I think I got this back in 2003, and it's a 2002 R7 that's just seen a lot of action.
Wow. Worst on-stage moment?
Oh boy, I got a lot of them. I mean, I've had a lot of wipeouts. I've been on stage quite a bit. Many years I was playing more gigs than there were days in the year. So I would say Rock of Ages. There was a moment where we were playing and the band platform was about 2 feet off the ground, and the main lead male and lead female were having this moment where they're falling in love. We're playing a medley of like, I think Heaven and To Be With You. And I reached out for, I think, the solo in Heaven and tried to hit a little bit of a rock stance, and my foot slipped off of the limited band platform. It was about yay high, but it was enough to knock me down on my ass while we're playing it, and which was funny enough. But my ass hit the other guitar player's channel changer, and it put it onto this fractal patch that was ungated with all the dirty New York power.
Yeah.
And of course, the front of house guy didn't think to turn it down. As the song comes to this stop and the two of them realize they're in love and they're about to kiss, you just hear coming through the PA. And I think they just kind of slowly turned before they kissed and looked back at the band platform and just, you know, saw me trying to get to my feet. Yeah, that was a humbling moment.
That's pretty cool. Well, not too cool, but still.
No, not cool at all. But I'm not cool at all.
Worth
Come on,
remembering,
man.
right?
This just in.
Builds character. Most underrated guitarist?
I got a lot of guys that I think that are known as great players, but people don't realize how great they are with their own voices, like Justin Derrico playing for Pink, and the voice. He's got great gigs, but Justin has his own voice on guitar and is so technically proficient and can really play anything as well.
Yep.
Justin's really up there for me.
Best guitar advice you've received?
I would say that is really just that you are capable of doing something with this, that it's just a matter of putting in the work. putting in the work and the time. I think there's this perception that people get lucky, right place, right time. Some of that is true, but you put yourself in that right place and right time through hard work. So the harder you work, the luckier you get.
I like that. That's very good. Best riff of all time.
I got to go with like, the one that always gets my rocks off is like Dirty Deeds.
Really?
So simple, but like the AC/DC stuff goes back to my roots.
Wow. All right. If you're not playing guitar, what are you doing?
Man, it has to be something music related. I mean, whether that be production, or just picking up other instruments and still finding a way to make music with it. Something in the arts. I mean, I've had crazy thoughts like, why don't you go for the acting thing? It's like, well, maybe because I have a face for radio, but you never know. I mean, definitely something artistic.
Awesome. I always loved, what was it? James Lipton had the, he always says, if heaven exists and you meet the Almighty, what would you like him to say to you?
I wish I'd done better. I think that's
pretty good.
I wish I'd done better. I mean, I think we all do. I mean, I feel like the longer things go on for me, the more I wished I'd taken advantage of every moment. But then again, it's all hindsight is 20/20, and you need to enjoy life too.
Yeah.
But I certainly have put in a lot, and I mean a lot of hours playing guitar and playing music. But I wish I'd gone further with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, that's it. It's great. The one thing I just want to say, that one thing I always loved about, I think I saw you, I think I made an interview with you once, and you said, it's like sometimes you can get wrapped up in what you do, like, because you're the rock guy and all that stuff, but because you were such I don't want to say you're a struggling musician, but you never really wanted to lose out on an opportunity, that you actually went into all these things that are outside of, say, your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I think you always made the best of it. And I totally agree with that. The reason being is that even when I was playing guitar, like in my first bands, and I remember the guys in the band were, we're going to play this, U2 song, or like, I'm like, fuck U2. I'm like, it's like, but then, I started playing these songs, and I started going like, wow, this shit's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
You get that aha moment, like when you actually start learning something, like sometimes you really, you gain a benefit in your own playing style, which I think you said that just playing with people who are not normally would be your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Doing all sorts of different things. And
Yeah.
Subbed in like, remember when the swing revival was happening?
Yes.
I was subbing in bands like that, trying to do the Brian Setzer
like
thing.
Like the Zoot Suit Riot stuff.
Just all kinds of stuff like that, man.
Yeah, it's like this sort of trend kind of swings by, and you're just like, oh my God, suddenly I got to learn this. And
check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Thank you, Joel. I appreciate you coming here and laying it all out. And check out Joel Hoekstra's 13, your brand new album, From the Fade, coming out very soon.
Thank you so much,
awesome.
man. Appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you.